Welcome friends to another Dune video. Today we examine the Sardaukar Onyx as they face Atreides troops led by Duncan Idaho, helping to try and free the planet and return it to the ally of House Atreides, Prince Vernius. Spoilers for the Dune Prelude series throughout, let's get straight into it. A worker on Ix comes before a Sardaukar commander who twists an ear till it draws blood. The worker says the prince has returned over and over. That would be Prince Vernius, deposed leader of Ix. The commander continues to strike the worker, cracking bones till he dies. The commander's eyes were feral. The Sardaukar on Ix, at this time, have been given a synthetic spice that made them savager than normal. Commander Garan goes to find more people to torture information from. Before he can put that into action, the alarm sounds. They are under attack. The Atreides fleet drops through the atmosphere and hit the Sardaukar defences, takes out their grid and then descends into the canyon. Bombs go off, planted by rebel Ixians. This knocks off the Sardaukar's sensor nets and installations. This killed the surface-to-air guns, and then the Atreides ships launched explosives, melting armour plates and blasting rock. Such had been the length of the occupation. The Sardaukar had lost their edge. They have been focusing on suppressing the people of the planet for so long. Duncan Idaho led a fleet who arrived on transports. They landed, swords drawn for shield fighting, meaning lasguns could not be used. They cry the names of the Duke and his ally the Prince, and the battle begins. The rebels faced Sardaukar, forming into regiments and firing flechette needles. Body shields protected some of the rebels, but a lot of innocents were also hurt, showing the Sardaukar's lack of care when they are in combat for innocents. The rebels used a suspensor platform to get higher. The Sardaukar fired, causing the platform to tilt. 4 rebels fell to their deaths, but the platform under Gurney reached its target, the Grand Palace. Despite them being a little soft, the Sardaukar are quickly recovering and hurting the invaders. On another level, Duncan Idaho led the Atreides against the Sardaukar, who take some of the fake spice and run into battle like animals. They were outnumbered. The book tells us, at close quarters, shields crackling, they discarded their long-range weapons and charged into the Atreides force, using well-timed knives, swords, and even bare hands to penetrate defensive shields. Each time the Sardaukar subdued one of Duke Leto's fighters, they disabled his shield and ripped him apart in an instant. Despite the extra savage edge they have from the spice, their training is still highly effective. Commander Garan went into Duncan's troops. He used a Kinjal dagger. He pierced eyes, severed jugular veins, and simply ignored the Atreides assaults around him. A brash Kaldan lieutenant slipped in from the side, dipped the point of his sword through the commander's shield, and stabbed it into the meat of Garen's shoulder. Here we see the advantage the Sardaukar have. They become reckless, but as we will see in a moment, they can also fight on despite injury. Garen ignored the attack and plunged into the melee, the spice feeding his frenzy. The Sardaukar then moved forward with no formation, a primitive attack style, but still deadly. The Atreides begin to buckle. Duncan Idaho shouted and held up the sword of Leto's father. Leto's men pushed forward, hearing Duncan, but the wild Sardaukar did not give up ground. They refused to quit. Duncan saw no end to the battle, and the Sardaukar rallied again. More Sardaukar troops joined the fight outside. They ran forward, screaming, pure and simple. Here we see their resistance and how hard it is to break one of their brigades. Despite this, slowly, the Atreides and the rebel Ixians began to take Ix back, section by section, but the Sardaukar fought on, ignoring pain or nasty wounds. They showed no fear. One dragged an Atreides fighter down to the ground, and using a hand switched off the young soldier's shields and then ripped out the soldier's throat with his teeth. Seeing they would never stop, Duncan changes strategy and in the Atreides battle language tells his forces to head for the Grand Palace. The Atreides pulled back from the savage Sardaukar and formed a phalanx, a group of warriors standing in close formation. With Duncan at the head, Duncan struck at any Sardaukar that came near. They went from the admin buildings, and the book tells us, a lone, defiant Sardaukar soldier, his uniform torn and blooded, stood in the middle of a skyway bridge that spanned the open grotto. When he saw Duncan's men charging towards him, he clasped a grenade to his chest and detonated it, blowing up the bridge. The attack takes the objective away from the enemy, but I don't think they would take out the bridge in that way normally, were they not so driven by the synthetic spice. Duncan looks for another route and wonders how he can fight men like that, and finding a way, they enter the upper levels. The palace is wrecked inside. He comes across Gurney and Prince Romba fighting the Sardaukar. With Duncan's forces, the battle's fortunes turned, but more Sardaukar under Garon came, covered in blood and firing weapons. It seemed to be a suicide attack. Garon sees the prince and attacks him. He has a blade in each hand. Duncan steps in. Duncan crashed into Garon, striking him on the side. Their body shields collided like a thunderclap, with a momentum exchange that hurled Duncan backward. But the impact also diverted Garon, who staggered towards the gaping hole in the window wall, slipping on debris on the floor and plunging ahead. Deflected from his target, the ravening Sardaukar commander went wild, still charging. Seeing a chance to kill more of his enemy, Garon collided with 3 shouting Ixian rebels who stood too close to the edge of the smashed balcony. He spread his arms and, like a bulldozer, he swept the astonished victims over the precipice. Garon went over the side too, but he managed to grab a broken, protruding girder. Prince Romba, seeing Garon and knowing he was the son of the Supreme Bashar of the Sardaukar, reaches out to him. Garon snarls and says he would rather die and does not want to see his father in disgrace. The prince, despite this, grabbed him. Garon drew a knife and slashed, but struck the metal tendons of Romba's wrists. Duncan came to help. Garon attacked again, cutting through the cyborg hand, and he fell without a sound. And from there, the Atreides forces secured the Grand Palace, and Romba, with the aid of the Atreides, would secure Ix once again. We see here their dedication to the mission. Garon could not return to the Supreme Bashar a failure, and if not that, would rather die. Now friends, I turn this over to you. What do you think to the Sardaukar losing Ix? How could they have challenged the Atreides and held it? Have you charged into battle alongside Duncan Idaho? Comment down below.